He had bright hopes when moving to Qatar for work. After all, he could make a lot more than back home in Nepal, and would be able to send money back to his family. Unfortunately for Anil Lamashane, the salaries on migrant worker contracts are often very different from what is actually paid. Usually, employers choose what to pay the migrant workers, regardless of the contracts, and due to the lack of representation of the said workers, they get away with it scot free. Anil was only paid $9 per day and worked an excessive amount of hours every day under the scorching Qatar sun. Additionally, he and his fellow migrant workers usually didn't get the equipment necessary for hard labor, such as gloves and helmets. And by the off chance they did get equipment, the equipment was often of poor quality and did not offer enough protection. Similarly, the food was also of poor quality, which is a huge deal when working very long hours and doing strenuous work. When Anil tried to complain to his employers, his bosses only said, we will see, never actually making significant changes. The problem is, many immigrants are going through the same thing as Anil, and many more have passed away due to the criminal treatment of migrant workers in Qatar. The World Cup is a great spectacle that brings together not only the best soccer players in the world, but all the fans of the beautiful game. The 2022 World Cup will be held in Qatar, but behind the bright lights and perfectly manicured stadiums, there are countless migrant workers who have died building them. Qatar has a migrant population of around 1.3 million, and they make up around 87% of Qatar's total population. Yet they are legally not allowed to live near Qatari citizens, so they are exiled to labor camps, located miles away from the Qatari cities, with conditions such as these. Along with the sickening living conditions, in just 2012 to 2013, 964 workers from Nepal, India, and Bangladesh died. The majority of the deaths are connected to the lack of safety, nutrition, and excruciatingly long work hours that migrants are subjected to. All of the info aforementioned is in violation of Article 2 in the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, which states how all humans will be treated equally, regardless of the country a person belongs to. In addition to poor overall working conditions, a system known as kafala makes so that unskilled migrant laborers must have a sponsor, usually their employer, and gives the sponsor control over their workers' visas. Thus, migrants cannot leave the country without permission from their employer, meaning the employers can essentially trap their employees. The thing is, kafala has existed since the 1930s, as migrants were used to retrieve the oil that is so valuable to the Middle East. The word kafala actually originates from Bedouin culture and means to feed or support, and was previously a custom where tribes would offer protection and food to strangers in need. Despite how kafala has changed into a malicious system that benefits only the employers, migrant workers do indeed have worker rights due to Qatar's Law 14 of 2004. It requires workers to be paid on time, limits work hours, and sets requirements on health and safety, among other things. However, these so-called requirements are not enforced, and neither are other laws addressing migrant worker rights, so the migrants are still being taken advantage of. Thai farmers in Israel are currently in a very similar situation as the migrant workers in Qatar, as 122 Thai workers have died between 2008 and 2013. The farmers are paid below minimum wage, work hours above the legal maximum, and cannot switch employers. One farmer wanted to change his employer, as his job gave him respiratory problems. But even after a year, there was still no response from his superiors. Just like Qatar, Israel has laws protecting migrant workers, just they are not enforced, and the cries of the migrants are ignored. A large reason migrant rights has become a problem in Israel is because migrant workers have little representation, meaning they can easily be cheated of their money without anyone knowing, making the farming business very profitable for Israel. Clearly, a significant portion of the problems involving migrant working conditions come down to enforcement of laws, not just the actual laws themselves. Thus, the Qatari government should be forced to hire inspectors to look over the condition of the migrant labor camps and workplaces, and the bank accounts of migrants need to be constantly surveyed to ensure that they are being paid. Similarly, workplace deaths should be investigated and changes should be made accordingly to the findings. Although the changes would cause an increase in taxes to pay for the inspectors, Qatar has the highest income per capita in the world, so their citizens can more than afford it. Also, FIFA has a lot of leverage over Qatar due to the World Cup, which they can revoke, and they need to make the most of their position. Qatar should be forced into reforming or abolishing the kafala system, particularly the part where sponsors control their employees' visas. Additionally, standards need to be set for living and work so that workers have at least basic necessities, such as helmets for labor and a fridge to keep food from spoiling. The standards can be looked over by a third-party human rights organization to be approved. Should Qatar implement these changes, a lot of the complaints about them will be dropped, and they will be able to host the World Cup without any problem, which ultimately is their goal. Also, it would be more morally sound if they treated their migrant workers well, and would improve Qatar's reputation. So enforcing migrant worker laws would honestly be a win-win situation. Thank you for listening.